Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stu again, and this is Stu's News, a review of American high-speed rail happenings over the last month. In this August 2024 episode, we'll take a look at what went down in July. Starting off with Dallas-Fort Worth high-speed transportation and the biggest news of the month, NCT COG strikes back. The Dallas City Council's rebuke of an aerial route through downtown last month left the North Central Texas Council of Government scrambling, and they've come up with a new aerial route on the other side of Interstate 35 East. Let's take a look at the two routes. First, the original. Here we are coming into Dallas from the west across the Trinity River next to Union Pacific right-of-way. This is on viaduct that is roughly 80 feet above ground level. The route will buzz the Dallas County Justice Center and go over a couple of parking structures. Dallas is looking to demolish this complex and rebuild it, so some liberties are taken with the space. By the way, this is an NCT COG route, not mine. These routes are based on official documents but are not exact. They're meant to give you a good idea of what it might look like, but not an exact one. Also, I make these renders myself. You will only find this type of content on this channel. No one else is showing you video of what these routes might look like. This route passes between the Hyatt Regency and Eddie Bernice Johnson Union Station. I'm not showing it here, but optionally this route would include a people mover under the high-speed rail tracks that would be accessed several stories up, and also possibly an elevated park. That people mover would connect Union Station, the Hyatt, Reunion Tower, and a rebuilt Dallas Convention Center. By the Convention Center, the route flies over the Houston and Jefferson viaducts, still about 80 feet up, and then it will move toward the Texas Central Railway station site. That station site is environmentally cleared, and the station would be 7 stories up. Hence the viaduct and sticking with this station despite it being in an awkward spot south of downtown. The station model is a placeholder I threw together with available assets. And now the new route circumventing the downtown area. This route would cross the Trinity River 500 feet to the south, following an old abandoned rail spur, presumably. Here, the tracks passing between these two buildings at the Justice Center is a bit fanciful. More than likely, one or both buildings would be demolished. As you can see, this route stays far away from the Hyatt, about 1,000 feet at the closest. It also steers clear of a planned multi-billion-dollar development next to the Hyatt. The route would then cross through an area mainly populated by bail bondsmen and liquor stores, traveling roughly 100 feet up to get over the large intersection of Interstate 30 and Interstate 35 East. After that, once again crossing over the Houston and Jefferson viaducts, but even higher up this time. By the way, anywhere you see buildings under the tracks, those are presumably ending up as mushroom clouds. Then the route would wind back to the same Texas Central Railway site. This ditches the people mover idea, but presumably they'll want an elevated pedestrian connection between the TCR station and the convention center at least. The convention center and the station site are about 1,300 feet apart. That would also provide a connection to Dart Light Rail. I'll make a dedicated DFW HST video once it looks like it will actually get built. The running feud between Dallas and the city of Arlington continues. This started with a spat between Dallas City Council member Kara Mendelson and Arlington Mayor Jim Ross. At the last NCT COG Transportation Committee meeting, Mendelson was requesting that the recent high-speed rail workshop be postponed to August, since the Dallas City Council is in recess in July. NCT COG had the workshop on July 11th anyway, where they showed the new route proposal. Some in Dallas have floated the idea of bypassing Arlington entirely, to which Jim Ross responded by misquoting Rodney King and attributing it to Michael Jackson. Things are heating up in Dallas, so let's move to cooler climes and immerse ourselves in Cascadia high-speed rail. The Washington State Department of Transportation released their June 2024 project update, 12 pages of not much to report. As you may know, the project is currently stuck at a siding, waiting for federal funding for yet another study. Washington got stiffed in last year's federal-state partnership for intercity passenger rail grants, but is working its way through the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor ID program. WSDOT is just about done with step 1 of that process. I do want to say this document has plenty of golden bureaucratic speak nuggets though. Here under organizational framework, 2 new committees have been created, and those will join the existing executive and leadership committees in the coordinating entity structure. That sounds exciting. Let's dig more into that. It says one of the things they've done over the last year is, quote, developed an approach for implementing the governance structure in preparation of potential federal funding for the project. With this kind of progress in such a short time span, how is this thing not built yet? Okay, that's enough Cascadia high-speed rail. We'll check back on the planning progress next year. Hey, speaking of federal funding, this year's RAISE grants were announced and high-speed rail got the shaft. Last year, California High-Speed Rail and Brightline West received $25 million each. The only possible exception to this jilting is Northeast Maglev. Bet you didn't see that coming. Baltimore-Washington International Thurgood Marshall Airport received $800,000 to study the feasibility of a multimodal ground transportation center which could include a Northeast Maglev station. Northeast Maglev, the entity attempting to build a maglev line between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland using 300-mile-per-hour Japanese technology, is currently twiddling their thumbs with a paused environmental review process. The FRA released a statement on July 18th that the project is still paused and that it is still being reviewed. As of August 2024, this review will be in its 4th year. Yay, federal government. We'll continue rolling with the one-hit wonders and stick to the East Coast with Southeast high-speed rail. Haven't talked about this one much in Stu's news, but it's a big idea with a lot of facets. One is the planned CSX S-Line conversion between Petersburg, Virginia and Raleigh, North Carolina, which is part of the slightly larger R2R passenger rail project from Raleigh to Richmond. North Carolina officials met up with Secretary of Transportation and Vice Presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg to break ground on construction of a 17-mile section of the project between Raleigh and Wake Forest, North Carolina. This is being designed to operate at 110 miles per hour. Sure, not true high-speed rail, but it is part of the Southeast High-Speed Rail Corridor and is foundational work for what could be higher speed transportation all the way down to Atlanta, Georgia at some point in the future. Now let's switch coasts and head to the desert, checking in on the High Desert Corridor. This is a 50-mile long high-speed rail corridor between Victorville and Palmdale, California that could eventually connect Brightline West and California High-Speed Rail. The High Desert Corridor Joint Powers Authority came to agreements with labor unions in regards to the project. For reference, and if you're optimistic, Brightline West was at the same point in their process in March of last year. Although unlike the HDC, Brightline West's environmental work was mostly done at that point. Speaking of Brightline West, let's check it out. German manufacturer PCM Rail 1 AG announced they will be opening a new facility in North Las Vegas to produce concrete rail ties for Brightline West. In the article, the company also intimates hope that they might supply California High-Speed Rail as well. I know concrete ties aren't the most interesting subject, but there is one juicy tidbit. They plan to start production in December of 2025. Brightline West continues with the construction advisories. It's worth noting they've moved this to a new page on their website, which is likely in preparation of broader construction beginning. For now, more of the same, but you can see it's all California at this point, lending weight to the theory that construction will begin in Nevada. Hopefully, we'll find out soon. Still on the West Coast, what's happening with California high-speed rail? Plenty of activity at the June Board of Directors meeting right after the last Stu's news was released. The final environmental impact statement for the Palmdale-Burbank section was approved by the board. I get questions about how California high-speed rail will handle seismic events, and the board meeting presentation had some nice slides for that. You can see they'll have an outer tunnel in fault zones so the inner tunnel bends but doesn't break. This is coupled with an early warning system to begin stopping trains before the shaking starts. One other issue they have to contend with is high groundwater pressure. The solution there is to double line tunnels in those areas. More reasons tunneling on this project will be very expensive. The track and overhead systems contract process for the Central Valley was finally completed at that board meeting. That contract was awarded to a partnership between SEHSR and TIPSA, which have huge amounts of high-speed rail experience globally. The contract is for up to $160 million, potentially covering the 170 miles from Merced to Bakersfield, and extends 6 years, 8 months. If you're not good at math, that means it ends in 2031. Next year's budget was also announced, coming in at $2.63 billion. This is an improvement of $780 million over the budget year that just concluded. That's great, but it needs to be emphasized this is the minimum amount that needs to be spent just to keep up with inflation. Realistically, they should be spending twice this amount, but of course funding is an issue. And lastly, it was announced that CFO Brian Annis would be retiring. So that means that the CEO and CFO are both jumping ship. That's always a good sign. No F&A committee meeting this month. July's board meeting was held in private, and no Central Valley reports were published at the time of this video's recording, so you get a reprieve. With that, we'll say goodbye to California high-speed rail and hello to Acela and the NEC. More power problems on the NEC, but even NJ Transit managed to admit this one wasn't Amtrak's fault. A power company's line fell on NEC catenary in Raleigh, New Jersey, and kablooey. People were too busy being mad to recognize that Amtrak took only 2 hours to partially restore service. In June, in response to the continuing power problems, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker wrote a nice letter to our favorite Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, asking him to fix the sagging wires. No response from Pete yet. The attempt at controversy by Ameristar Rail seems to have failed, and early work on the Susquehanna River Bridge has commenced. That bridge is set to be completed in 2036. Amtrak chose a joint venture of Tutor Perini and O&G as contractors for construction of the new Connecticut River Bridge. Construction is imminent, and the new movable bridge is expected to be complete by the beginning of 2030. The Portal North Bridge project in New Jersey saw a plethora of update videos drop. Links in the description if you're interested.
What is a plethora?
It's a lot. Now let's take a look at the Amtrak reports. Another good month for Amtrak on the NEC. Keep in mind, these reports run 2 months behind, and these numbers are for May. Solid across the board with increases for every category month over month and year over year. The standout was NEC Regional, up 6.2% month over month in revenue and 5.6% in operating earnings. This helped overall NEC to a 9.7% increase in year-over-year revenue and 14.3% for year-over-year operating earnings. Ridership for the fiscal year so far topped 9 million trips and is up 22% compared to fiscal year 2023. That means the NEC accounted for 43% of all Amtrak traffic in the country during the current fiscal year through May. And with that, we'll say adios to Acela and the NEC because it's time for Stu's Boo Boos, where I go over everything I got wrong or missed last month. When discussing House appropriations via H.R. 4820, which threatened to cut California high-speed rail off from federal funding, I made it sound like this had been shelved and had some hope of resurrection. However, appropriations were handled through the consolidated H.R. 4366 with no such provision for California high-speed rail, so it's safe for now. However, it looks like Republicans are going to hold on to the House in the upcoming elections, so there's always next year. Big thanks to Ebel_2 for pointing that out and making sure our disdain for Congress is sure and true. That brings the gold star total to 13, silver stars 3. As always, if you find a boo-boo in this presentation or something I missed, let me know in the comments. If it's a good one, you win a prize. A big thanks to the Lucid Group Discord channel for their help and support. If you'd like to join our motley crew, check out the invite in the description. Speaking of thanks, I have enabled super thanks, so check out that button below the video if you'd like to support the channel in that way. I have decided to dedicate those funds to full Rancho Cucamonga to Las Vegas trips once Brightline West starts construction. So if enough are received, we could have full-length 218-mile updates every month, instead of Rancho to Victorville monthly and Vegas quarterly like I was planning. Also, a big thanks to those that have already hit that button. Plenty more videos from your favorite channel series are on their way, but that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big beautiful freeway.